Emma Brooks stared at her reflection in the ladies' room mirror at the grand ballroom of the Century Plaza Hotel and took a shaky breath. Her navy blue dress was perfect, her makeup flawless, but her expression screamed pure panic. In 5 minutes, she'd have to return to the company gala where all the executives' wives were eyeing her with those patronizing smiles that said, "Poor thing, still single at 31. Breathe, Emma. It's just a dinner. You've survived board presentations to Fortune 500 executives. You can survive a few judgmental socialites," she muttered to herself, reapplying her lipstick for the third time. The problem was that exactly 15 minutes ago, she'd committed the most epic blunder of her career. When Patricia Blackwood, the CEO's wife, had asked in front of the entire table, "So, darling, when do we get to meet your husband?" Emma had simply frozen. The awkward silence stretched for agonizing seconds until she heard her own voice saying, "Actually, he's here tonight. My husband works at the company." Patricia nearly dropped her crystal champagne flute. "Really? Who is it? Do we know him?" And that's when Emma made the mistake of the century. Her eyes desperately scanned the ballroom until they landed on the only man she recognized among the sea of black tuxedos. It's Ryan Chambers." The silence that followed was even worse than the first one. Ryan Chambers, the most intimidating director in the company, the man who had rejected every single one of Emma's creative proposals for the past 18 months, the guy she was convinced disliked her from their very first meeting. Ryan Chambers? Patricia arched her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. "Goodness, what a surprise. You two are remarkably discreet." "Extremely discreet." Emma forced a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. "Company policy, you understand? We prefer to maintain professional boundaries." Now here she was, hiding in the restroom while Ryan Chambers probably had no idea he'd become her fictional husband 15 minutes ago. Emma took a deep breath and pushed open the mahogany door. She had to find Ryan and explain the situation before someone congratulated him on his marriage. She crossed the marble-floored ballroom with determination until she spotted his commanding presence near the mahogany bar, engaged in conversation with other senior executives. Ryan Chambers was the complete opposite of everything Emma found appealing in a man. Tall, austere, always impeccably dressed with an expression that suggested the entire world operated below his standards. Dark brown hair always perfectly styled, sleek black glasses that made his emerald green eyes look even more analytical, and that deliberate way of speaking, as if every syllable required careful consideration. Emma approached with her heart racing like she was about to deliver the presentation of her lifetime, which, considering the circumstances, maybe she was. "Excuse me," she interrupted the men's discussion. "Ryan, could I speak with you privately? It's rather urgent." Ryan turned deliberately, those penetrating green eyes scrutinizing her from head to toe, like she was a quarterly report with questionable numbers. "Emma, what's the matter? It's somewhat personal." She smiled tensely at the other executives. "Married couple business, you know how it is." The other men chuckled and dispersed with those predictable comments about domestic negotiations. Ryan's brow furrowed. "Married couple?" Emma guided him to a quieter area near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. "Listen, I realize we don't exactly have a harmonious working relationship. That's a diplomatic way to phrase, you consider me an inflexible perfectionist, and I find your proposals creatively ambitious but analytically weak." Ryan interrupted with that measured tone she knew all too well. "Wonderful, thank you for that brutally honest assessment of our professional dynamic." Emma inhaled deeply. "But I desperately need your assistance. Something rather complicated has occurred." "Rather? All right. Extremely complicated. Monumentally complicated. Career-endingly complicated." Ryan crossed his arms, his expensive watch catching the chandelier light. "Emma, you have 30 seconds before I conclude this is an inefficient use of my time. I informed the executives' wives that you're my husband." The silence that followed was so profound that Emma could distinguish the string quartet in the corner, distant conversations, and even the faint hum of the air conditioning. Ryan observed her with an expression she'd never witnessed before. It wasn't annoyance, shock, or disapproval. It was something far more unsettling, barely suppressed fascination. "Fascinating," he finally said. "And what precisely motivated this declaration?" "Because they were studying me with those pitying expressions, you understand. Poor dear, over 30 and still unmarried. And I simply panicked. And among all the gentlemen in this ballroom, you specifically selected the individual who, according to your previous assessment, possesses the warmth and spontaneity of a financial spreadsheet." Emma's eyes widened in mortification. "You overheard that conversation?" "I possess functional hearing, Emma, and your frustration tends to compromise your volume control." Her cheeks blazed crimson. "Look, I acknowledge it was a spectacularly poor decision, but—" "Patricia is approaching our location," Ryan interrupted, gesturing subtly, accompanied by approximately 4 other wives, all displaying obvious curiosity about our matrimonial arrangement. Emma pivoted and observed the group advancing like designer-clad investigators pursuing a promising lead. Complete panic activated. "What should I do? What should I do? They'll discover my deception immediately." Ryan exhaled slowly, like someone contemplating a high-stakes business merger. "You owe me a comprehensive explanation of how we arrived at this preposterous situation. Does that indicate you'll—" "It indicates you've just placed me in circumstances requiring performance skills I definitively lack." Patricia materialized with her entourage, all radiating that particular smile that signaled imminent social interrogation. "Ryan, how delightful to discover you two together. We were just discussing how we never detected any romantic connection." "You're truly masters of discretion." Ryan glanced at Emma, then at Patricia, and she witnessed the precise moment he made a decision that would transform everything. "Indeed," he said, placing his arm around Emma's waist with apparent naturalness, though she detected the tension in his posture. "When you encounter the right person, public displays become unnecessary." Emma nearly choked on her own breath. Ryan's arm encircling her was unexpectedly warm and steady, and she had to resist the impulse to step away. Not because it was uncomfortable, which was disturbing enough, but because it felt right. And that realization was absolutely terrifying. "How long have you been together?" inquired one of the women. Emma started to respond, but Ryan spoke first. "Approximately 2 years. We developed our relationship gradually, didn't we, darling?" He regarded her with an expression that could appear affectionate to observers, unfamiliar with his analytical green eyes, and the controlled alarm she detected there. "Emma has always approached everything with remarkable determination." "Determination is certainly accurate." Emma smiled in return, deciding that if they were committing to this fabrication, she'd ensure he shared the consequences. "Ryan is considerably more systematic. He prefers to evaluate every variable before reaching any conclusion. Extraordinarily systematic." The women laughed as if witnessing the most charming exchange imaginable. But Emma noticed Ryan's almost imperceptible jaw tightening. "Point taken. How romantic. When was the ceremony? Why didn't you include colleagues from the company?" Emma responded swiftly. "We opted for an intimate celebration, immediate family only." "Ryan values privacy tremendously, don't you, sweetheart?" "As does Emma," he replied smoothly. "She prefers avoiding unnecessary attention." Patricia applauded enthusiastically. "Absolutely enchanting. You must join our table immediately. I insist. Harrison will be thrilled to learn that Ryan finally discovered someone capable of appreciating his unique qualities." And thus Emma found herself being escorted to the evening's head table, arm linked with the man she'd considered her primary professional adversary, preparing to spend the subsequent 3 hours portraying the devoted wife of Ryan Chambers. As they settled into adjacent seats at the elegantly appointed table featuring white roses and crystal votives, Ryan leaned discreetly in her direction. "Emma," he murmured, You've just created the most significant complication of our respective careers." She beamed radiantly at their table mates and whispered back, "I'm fully aware. What happens next?" "Next," he replied, maintaining his artificial smile, "spontaneous performance has never been among my competencies." The dinner was turning into an Olympic-level endurance test. Emma had never imagined that pretending to be married to Ryan Chambers would require such athletic improvisation. Every question from the other women demanded lightning-fast reflexes and creative storytelling to keep their charade functioning. "So, Emma, tell us all about the proposal." Patricia attacked again, clearly determined to extract every delicious detail. Emma nearly choked on her lobster bisque. Ryan, who had been methodically cutting his filet mignon with surgical precision, paused his knife mid-air for a fraction of a second before continuing as if nothing had happened. "Oh, it was incredibly romantic," Emma improvised. "Ryan is full of surprises." "Really? He seems so serious at the office. He must have a hidden romantic side." Ryan finally looked up, those penetrating green eyes meeting Emma's with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "Emma has a remarkable ability to inspire aspects of my personality that I didn't realize existed." This time it was Emma who froze with her spoon halfway to her mouth. There was something in his tone that sounded far too genuine for comfort. "That's absolutely true," she said, deciding to return the favor. "Ryan is much more sensitive than he appears. He has this wonderfully protective instinct." "Protective how?" One of the women leaned forward, intrigued. Emma panicked internally. Protective? Ryan Chambers, protective? The man who had demolished her Valentine's Day campaign proposal because it lacked sufficient market research data? "Well, he always makes sure I get home safely when I work late at the office," she invented desperately. "Really?" Patricia turned to Ryan with delight. "How thoughtful. And you, Ryan, what do you love most about Emma?" Ryan set down his silverware completely and studied Emma in a way that made her stomach perform an unexpected somersault. "Emma possesses an extraordinary talent for discovering opportunities where others see only obstacles. She's relentless. Sometimes frustratingly relentless, but always with purpose." The silence at the table shifted to something different this time. Less curious, more moved. Emma felt her cheeks warming. That had sounded disturbingly authentic. "Oh, how beautiful." One of the women sighed. "You two are such a perfect match." That's when Emma noticed Ryan's hand resting on the white tablecloth, positioned very close to hers. Without overthinking it, she interlaced her fingers with his. The reaction was immediate. He tensed visibly but didn't pull away. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said softly, gently squeezing his hand. Ryan stared at their joined hands with fascinating concentration, as if analyzing a particularly complex business proposal. The remainder of dinner passed in a surreal blend of performance and strangely intimate moments. Emma discovered that Ryan possessed a dry wit that only emerged in comments murmured close to her ear. Ryan learned that Emma could fabricate elaborate stories about their life together with impressive creativity. "Remember when you tried to teach me how to make that chocolate soufflé?" Emma laughed, spinning a completely fictional tale about a culinary disaster. "You nearly destroyed my kitchen," Ryan responded naturally, entering the game with more ease than she'd expected. "Your kitchen? You didn't even know where you kept the measuring cups." Technical details. The other women laughed as if it were the most adorable exchange imaginable, and Emma realized they had developed an unexpectedly natural chemistry in their act. Ryan wasn't just the stern executive she knew. He was intelligent, had excellent comedic timing, and when he relaxed slightly, even charming. When dinner finally concluded and guests began dispersing, Emma and Ryan found themselves alone near the hotel's marble-columned lobby. "Well," Ryan said, loosening his black silk tie, "we survived the opening act." "I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess," Emma sighed. "I genuinely didn't consider the consequences." "Emma," Ryan turned to face her directly, "have you contemplated that we now need to maintain this deception at the office as well? These women communicate with other people. This news will circulate throughout the company. Reality crashed over Emma like an ice-cold wave. Oh my goodness. You're absolutely right. Everyone will know that we're supposedly married. The word is married, Emma. I can't even say it. How are we going to manage this at work? You barely acknowledge my existence normally. Ryan ran his fingers through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it for the first time Emma could remember seeing. He looked more human that way. We'll need to establish some ground rules, he said. First, no excessive public displays of affection. We're a discreet couple, remember? Obviously. Second, we need to coordinate our stories. If someone asks for details, we must provide consistent answers. Emma nodded agreement. Makes perfect sense. And third? Ryan hesitated. Third, this remains strictly professional. It's not real, Emma. It's simply a temporary situation until we devise an elegant exit strategy. Of course, she agreed quickly. Obviously. Who suggested it would be real? That would be ridiculous. Completely ridiculous, Ryan repeated. They stood in silence for a moment, studying everything except each other. So, Emma broke the quiet. I'll see you Monday at the office, honey? Ryan winced visibly. We'll need to practice that aspect, the endearing nicknames. Why? I thought it sounded natural. Emma, you said honey like you were swallowing medicine. She laughed despite their predicament. You weren't much better with that robotic darling. I was improvising under pressure. Then let's practice, Emma decided boldly. Say something affectionate to me. Ryan stared at her as if she'd suggested they perform interpretive dance in the hotel lobby. Right now. Why not? It needs to sound believable. Emma. Just one phrase. Anything. Ryan took a deep breath like someone preparing to dive into uncharted waters. You look beautiful tonight. Emma blinked in surprise. There was something in the way he said it that made her heart accelerate unexpectedly. That was good, she said more quietly than intended. Your turn. What? Say something affectionate to me. Emma felt her palms growing damp. This shouldn't be difficult. It was just practice, just acting. You're actually quite handsome when you're not scowling at budget reports. Ryan's eyebrows rose slightly. Quite handsome? I was being honest. Honest is dangerous territory, Emma. There was something in his voice that made the hotel lobby suddenly feel much smaller and more intimate. Emma became acutely aware of how close they were standing, how his loosened tie made him appear less intimidating and more approachable. Maybe we should call it a night, she said quickly. Big day tomorrow, figuring out how to convince our colleagues we're madly in love. Madly in love. Ryan's mouth curved into what might have been the beginning of a smile. I thought we agreed on discreet affection. Right. Discreetly in love, quietly smitten, professionally devoted. You're making it worse. Emma groaned and covered her face with her hands. This is going to be a complete disaster. Ryan surprised her by gently pulling her hands away from her face. Emma, look at me. She met his eyes, suddenly struck by how different he seemed outside the office environment. Less intimidating, more human. We're both intelligent professionals, he said calmly. We can handle this situation with dignity and strategic planning. It's simply a matter of consistent performance and coordinated messaging. You make it sound like a business merger. In a way, it is. A temporary strategic partnership with clearly defined objectives and success metrics. Emma stared at him for a moment, then burst out laughing. Only you would turn fake marriage into a corporate initiative. It's a proven framework for complex problem solving. Ryan, yes? Tomorrow is going to be absolutely insane. Ryan adjusted his glasses and straightened his tie. Yes, he agreed. It certainly is. As they walked toward the hotel exit, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere between the lobster bisque and the chocolate mousse, something had shifted between them. Something that had nothing to do with their fictional marriage and everything to do with the very real way Ryan had looked at her when he called her beautiful. Which was completely ridiculous, of course, wasn't it? Emma arrived at the office Monday morning with the confidence of someone walking into a lion's den wearing a meat dress. She'd spent the entire weekend rehearsing casual conversations in her bathroom mirror and Googling how to act like you're married to your boss without dying of embarrassment. The results had not been encouraging. She was attempting to look nonchalant while organizing her desk when her assistant, Jessica, practically bounced over with a coffee cup and barely contained excitement. "Emma, I heard the most incredible rumor this weekend." Jessica's eyes were sparkling with the kind of glee usually reserved for celebrity scandals. Emma's stomach dropped to somewhere around her ankles. "Oh? What kind of rumor?" "Apparently someone saw you at the company gala with Ryan Chambers, and they looked very cozy. Please tell me it's not true, because that would be like Beauty and the Beast. But if the Beast wore expensive suits and had an MBA." "Jessica." Emma tried to look shocked while simultaneously calculating how quickly she could flee to another country. I know. I shouldn't gossip, but seriously, Emma. Ryan Chambers? The guy who once sent back a report because you used Arial font instead of Times New Roman?" Before Emma could formulate a response that wouldn't technically count as perjury, the elevator dinged and Ryan stepped out, looking as impeccably professional as always. Their eyes met across the office space, and Emma felt that familiar flutter of panic mixed with something else she refused to analyze. Ryan nodded at her with what could charitably be called acknowledgement. To everyone else, it probably looked normal. To Emma, it felt like he was signaling the start of the most challenging performance of their lives. "Emma," Jessica grabbed her arm, "he's looking at you differently." "What do you mean differently?" "I don't know. Like he actually sees you instead of looking through you like you're a slightly disappointing quarterly report." Emma was saved from responding by her phone buzzing with a text from Ryan. "Conference room B in 5 minutes. We need to discuss the Henderson project." There was no Henderson project. "I have to go," Emma told Jessica, grabbing her notebook. "Meeting. With who?" Emma paused, realizing this was her first test. Ryan. About the Henderson project." Jessica's eyebrows shot up so high they practically disappeared into her hairline. "Since when do you have private meetings with Ryan Chambers?" "Since today, apparently." Emma hurried to conference room B, her heart doing some kind of interpretive dance routine in her chest. She found Ryan already there, standing by the window with his back to her, looking like a brooding hero from a business romance novel. "We have a problem," he said, without turning around. "Already? It's only Monday morning." Ryan pivoted to face her, his expression grim. "I received 3 congratulatory emails this weekend about our marriage, including one from HR asking why we didn't file the proper disclosure paperwork for inter-office relationships." Emma sank into a chair. "Oh no, what did you tell them?" "That we were handling the paperwork this week. Which means we now have approximately 4 days to either file fake marriage documents or confess to the entire company that we're elaborate liars." "Can we file fake documents?" Ryan stared at her with the expression of someone questioning every life choice that led to this moment. "Emma, that would be fraud." "Right, obviously, I knew that." She definitely hadn't known that. "So we confess and destroy both our careers when word spreads that we fabricated a marriage to impress socialites at a company gala?" "I don't think so." Emma buried her face in her hands. "This is getting out of control so fast." "It gets worse," Ryan continued mercilessly. "Patricia Blackwood called my assistant this morning. She wants to arrange a dinner party for us next Saturday, at her house, with her husband and 3 other executive couples." "A dinner party? Like where they'll ask us personal questions for 3 hours while we eat fancy food and try not to blow our cover?" "Precisely." Emma looked up at Ryan, who was pacing the small conference room like a caged accountant. "You know what the really crazy part is? That we're discussing marriage fraud in a conference room named after a motivational poster? No, that we're actually pretty good at this fake marriage thing. Last night at the gala, we had chemistry. We were Convincing. Ryan stopped pacing and fixed her with one of his analytical stares. Chemistry is a scientific term, Emma. What we had was synchronized improvisation based on mutual desperation. Call it whatever you want, but those women bought it completely. Before Ryan could respond, the conference room door opened and Mark Stevens from accounting walked in, then immediately backed out with an embarrassed grin. Sorry, I didn't realize this room was occupied by you two, together. Privately. He waggled his eyebrows suggestively. I'll just find another room, don't mind me. The door closed, leaving Emma and Ryan staring at each other in horror. He thinks we were, Emma started. Having a romantic encounter in a conference room. Ryan finished flatly. During work hours. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Now everyone's going to be watching us, analyzing every interaction, looking for signs of our supposed relationship. As if summoned by their panic, Jessica's voice came through the intercom. Emma, Patricia Blackwood's assistant is online too. Something about dinner plans? Emma and Ryan exchanged a look of mutual terror. Answer it, Ryan said grimly. And remember, we're happily married professionals who are completely normal and definitely not committing elaborate deception. Emma picked up the phone with hands that were only slightly trembling. Hello? Emma, darling. Patricia's voice was so cheerful it was practically weaponized. I hope you don't mind me calling during work hours, but I simply had to speak with you about Saturday evening. Saturday evening sounds wonderful, Emma replied, making frantic gestures at Ryan, who was now looking like he was contemplating jumping out the window. Marvelous. Now, I thought we'd keep it intimate, just 4 couples. You and Ryan, of course, Harrison and myself, the Hendersons and the Washingtons. Very cozy. Cozy, Emma repeated weakly. And I thought it would be fun to do one of those games where couples answer questions about each other. You know, like how you met, your first kiss, what annoys you most about each other, all those delicious little details that make marriages so fascinating. Emma's vision started going spotty around the edges. Questions about each other. How fun. I know, right? It'll be such a lovely way for everyone to get to know you two better. You're both so private at work. When Emma finally hung up, Ryan was sitting in a chair with his head in his hands. Let me guess, he said without looking up. Couples trivia night. She wants to know our first kiss story. Of course she does. And what annoys us most about each other. Well, that one should be easy enough. Emma sat down across from him. Ryan, we need to actually learn things about each other. Real things, personal things. Enough to convince people we've been married for 2 years. Ryan looked up, his hair slightly messed from running his fingers through it. You're suggesting we conduct interviews about our personal lives? I'm suggesting we spend time together outside of work. Get to know each other well enough to answer questions without looking like strangers pretending to be married. Emma, that sounds dangerously close to... To what? To actually developing a relationship. There was something in his voice that made Emma's pulse quicken. It's just research, Ryan. Market research for our marital brand. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those penetrating green eyes. Fine, he said finally. But we do this systematically. I'll create a questionnaire covering all the basic information married couples would know about each other. Of course you'll create a questionnaire. We'll meet tonight after work. Your apartment or mine? Emma felt a flutter of something that definitely wasn't panic. Mine? 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock, Ryan agreed, standing and straightening his tie. And Emma? Yes? We tell no one about this meeting. As far as anyone knows, we're just going home to our respective residences like any normal married couple who definitely doesn't need to study for their own relationship. Got it. Secret marriage homework. This is my life now. Ryan paused at the door. Emma? Yeah? For what it's worth, I think we might actually pull this off. After he left, Emma sat alone in the conference room, wondering when exactly her life had turned into a romantic comedy, written by someone with a degree in business administration. and why the thought of Ryan Chambers coming to her apartment tonight was making her more nervous than excited about their elaborate deception. Which was completely ridiculous, right? Emma had cleaned her apartment 3 times in the 4 hours since leaving work. She'd rearranged her living room furniture twice, changed clothes 4 times, and was currently staring at her kitchen wondering if she should attempt to cook something that would make her seem like a competent adult human being. The problem was that Ryan Chambers was coming to her apartment in exactly 17 minutes, and she was having the kind of nervous breakdown usually reserved for teenage girls before prom. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself, yanking open her refrigerator. "He's not your actual husband. He's not even your actual friend. He's just a colleague who got trapped in your web of social anxiety and poor impulse control." Her refrigerator stared back at her with the accusatory emptiness of someone who survived primarily on takeout and emergency granola bars. She had yogurt that might have expired during the Clinton administration, some wilted lettuce that looked like it was auditioning for a zombie movie, and a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. This definitely qualified as a special occasion. Not a good one, but definitely special. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock, because of course Ryan Chambers was punctual, even for fake marriage preparation meetings. Emma took a deep breath, smoothed her casual but not too casual sweater, and opened the door. Ryan stood in her hallway holding a leather portfolio, a laptop bag, and what appeared to be a small whiteboard. He'd changed out of his work suit into dark jeans and a navy button-down shirt that made his green eyes look impossibly intense. Emma had never seen him in casual clothes before, and it was doing strange things to her equilibrium. "Hi," she said, then immediately felt stupid, because who says hi to their fake husband? "Good evening," Ryan replied formally, because apparently even in casual clothes he couldn't bring himself to say something as relaxed as, "Hi." "Come in." Emma stepped back, gesturing toward her living room. "Can I get you something to drink? I have wine, coffee, water, and—" She glanced toward her kitchen. Wine. "Wine sounds appropriate for this situation," Ryan said, looking around her apartment with the kind of careful attention she'd seen him apply to quarterly reports. "This is nice. Very... you." Emma paused in the process of opening the wine bottle. "What does that mean?" "Colorful, creative, slightly chaotic but in an intentional way." He was studying her bookshelf, which was indeed a chaotic mix of marketing textbooks, romance novels, cookbooks she'd never used, and what appeared to be a small, succulent garden. "I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a performance review." Ryan turned back to her with what might have been a smile. "It was an observation, a positive one." Emma handed him a glass of wine and settled onto her couch, tucking her legs under her. Ryan remained standing, looking like he was preparing to deliver a presentation to the board of directors. "So," Emma said, "should I be concerned about the whiteboard?" "Visual aids enhance information retention," Ryan replied, setting up the small whiteboard on her coffee table with the seriousness of someone preparing for a military briefing. "I've prepared a comprehensive questionnaire covering the essential information married couples would know about each other." He opened his portfolio and pulled out what appeared to be a 10-page document. Emma's wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "Ryan, please tell me that's not what I think it is." "It's a systematic approach to relationship data collection. Section A covers basic biographical information. Section B addresses preferences and habits. Section C focuses on family background and personal history. And Section D tackles intimate knowledge and emotional intelligence indicators." Emma stared at him for a long moment. "Did you just say intimate knowledge while holding a spreadsheet?" "It's not a spreadsheet. It's a structured questionnaire." "Ryan." "Yes?" "We're supposed to be learning about each other, not conducting a census." Ryan looked down at his 10-page document, then back at Emma, then at the document again. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely uncertain. "I may have overcomplicated this," he admitted. "Just a little." Emma patted the couch beside her. "Come sit down. Let's just talk. Like normal people." Ryan approached the couch with the wariness of someone who'd never encountered the concept of casual conversation. He sat down, maintaining careful distance between them, and Emma noticed he smelled like expensive cologne and something else. Something clean and masculine that made her inexplicably want to move closer. "Okay," Emma said, curling up facing him. "Let's start simple. What's your favorite food? For what purpose? General consumption, special occasions, comfort food during stressful situations?" "Ryan, yes? Just your favorite food. The thing you'd want to eat if you could only eat one thing for the rest of your life." Ryan considered this with the gravity of someone choosing a retirement portfolio. "Pizza," he said finally. Emma nearly spilled her wine. "Pizza? Really? Is that surprising? I had you pegged for, I don't know, something more sophisticated. Coq au vin or beef Wellington or whatever rich people eat. I grew up in Cleveland, Emma. My dad was a high school math teacher and my mom worked at the library. We ate pizza on Friday nights and considered it a celebration." He paused, looking slightly surprised at himself. "I haven't thought about that in years." There was something in his voice that made Emma's chest tighten unexpectedly. "What kind of pizza?" "Pepperoni and mushrooms. Nothing fancy." Ryan took a sip of his wine. "What about you?" "Chocolate chip cookies, specifically the ones my grandmother made when I was little. She'd let me help, and I'd eat half the chocolate chips before they made it into the actual cookies." "That's not technically a meal. You asked for my favorite food, not my most nutritionally balanced choice." Ryan actually smiled at that. Not his polite professional smile, but something real and warm that transformed his entire face. Emma felt her heart do a little skip beat that had nothing to do with caffeine. "Okay, my turn," Emma said, settling deeper into the couch. "Biggest fear?" Ryan's smile faded. "That's rather personal for a fake marriage questionnaire." "Ryan, we're supposed to be convincing people we've been married for 2 years. Married people know each other's fears." "Fine." Ryan stared into his wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Mediocrity. Being average. Spending my entire life being competent but never exceptional at anything that matters." The honesty in his voice caught Emma completely off guard. She'd expected him to say something safe like spiders or public speaking, not something so raw and real. "That's not going to happen," she said quietly. "How can you be sure?" "Because mediocre people don't care about being exceptional. They just coast." "You don't coast, Ryan. You push and analyze and perfect everything until it's better than it was before." Ryan looked up at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Vulnerable, maybe, or surprised. "Your turn," he said. Emma pulled a throw pillow into her lap, hugging it like armor. Ending up alone, not just single. Alone, like becoming one of those people who talks to their cats and orders groceries online because they've forgotten how to interact with other human beings. "You have cats?" "No, but I'd get some for the talking." Ryan laughed, actually laughed, and Emma felt something shift in her chest. When he laughed, he looked completely different. Younger, more relaxed, infinitely more approachable. "That's not going to happen either," he said. "How can you be sure?" "Because you're the most socially engaging person I've ever met. You make friends with baristas and elevator operators and probably the people who deliver your mail." "How did you know about the mail carrier?" "Lucky guess." They fell into a comfortable silence, and Emma realized with some surprise that she was actually enjoying this. Not just the wine, but the conversation. The way Ryan looked when he relaxed. The discovery that beneath his corporate exterior was someone who grew up eating Friday night pizza and worrying about being ordinary. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said. "That's the point of this exercise. Why do you hate my marketing proposals so much?" Ryan set down his wine glass and turned to face her more fully. "I don't hate your proposals. You reject every single one. I reject them because they're brilliant ideas wrapped in insufficient research and presented with more enthusiasm than data." Emma blinked. "You think my ideas are brilliant?" "Emma, you have more creative insight in your little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. Your campaign concepts are innovative, memorable, and exactly the kind of fresh thinking the company needs. But you always send them back. Because brilliant ideas without proper support get killed in board meetings. I send them back so you'll strengthen them, not because I want to discourage you. Emma stared at him, feeling like she was seeing Ryan Chambers clearly for the first time. You've been trying to help me? I've been trying to make your work bulletproof so it survives the approval process. By crushing my spirit with endless revision requests, by ensuring your creativity gets the platform it deserves. Emma felt something warm and complicated unfurling in her chest. I thought you hated me. Emma. Ryan's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I think you're the most talented person in that office. I've always thought that. The air between them seemed to change, becoming charged with something Emma couldn't quite name. Ryan was looking at her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of how close they were sitting, how his casual clothes made him seem less like her intimidating boss and more like a man, a very attractive man who apparently thought she was brilliant. We should probably get back to the questionnaire, Ryan said quietly, but he didn't move away. Probably, Emma agreed, but she didn't move either. Emma? Yes? At the dinner party on Saturday, they're going to ask about our first kiss. I know. We should probably have a story prepared. We should. A believable story. Very believable. Neither of them moved. The space between them felt electric, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. Emma, Ryan said again, his voice rough around the edges. Yes? This is a very bad idea. What is? But before he could answer, Emma's phone rang with the aggressive cheerfulness of someone calling about her car's extended warranty. The spell, or whatever it had been, shattered completely. Emma grabbed her phone and hit decline, but the damage was done. Ryan had moved back to his original position, the careful distance restored, his expression shifting back toward professional neutrality. We should focus, he said, reaching for his questionnaire. Saturday is only 5 days away. Right, Emma agreed, trying to ignore the way her heart was still racing. Focus, questionnaire, fake marriage preparation. Exactly. But as Ryan launched into Section B of his systematic approach to relationship data collection, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her when he called her brilliant, or the way the air had changed when he mentioned their fictional first kiss. This was supposed to be pretend. A temporary deception to get them out of an embarrassing social situation. So why did it suddenly feel like the most real thing that had happened to her in months? Emma? Ryan was looking at her expectantly. Question 7. What's your ideal vacation destination? Anywhere that doesn't require me to lie about being married to my boss, she said without thinking. Ryan's pen paused over his notepad. That's not going to fit in the answer space. Then maybe we need a bigger answer space. Emma? Yes. Are we going to be okay? She looked at him, really looked at him, sitting in her living room with his careful questions and his wine glass and his button-down shirt that made his eyes look like sea glass. Ask me Saturday night, she said. Saturday evening arrived with all the enthusiasm of a root canal appointment. Emma stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying on her 4th outfit, and wondering if there was a dress code for pretending to be married to your boss while being interrogated by socialites with advanced degrees in detecting relationship fraud. She'd settled on a deep burgundy wrap dress that was elegant without being flashy, professional without being boring, and hopefully gave off the vibe of happily married woman who definitely knows her husband's middle name and favorite childhood pet. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Arriving in 10 minutes, remember. We've been married 2 years, met at a marketing conference in Chicago, and your engagement ring is being resized. Emma looked down at her bare left hand and felt a fresh wave of panic. They'd spent the past 5 days meeting every evening after work, cramming for their marriage like it was the most important exam of their lives. She now knew that Ryan's middle name was Alexander. He was allergic to shellfish. His first pet was a golden retriever named Einstein, and he had a small scar on his left knee from falling off his bike when he was 7. More importantly, She'd learned that Ryan Chambers was nothing like the cold, analytical director she'd thought she knew. He was funny when he wasn't trying to be professional. He listened to classic rock when he worked late. He'd taught himself to cook because his college roommate nearly poisoned them both with ramen experiments. And when he smiled, really smiled, it did things to her cardiovascular system that probably required medical supervision, which was absolutely not relevant to their current situation. The doorbell rang, and Emma's stomach performed an Olympic-level gymnastics routine. She opened the door to find Ryan standing in her hallway, wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him like it had been designed specifically to make her forget how to breathe properly. "Hi," she said, then mentally kicked herself because after 5 days of intensive marriage training, she should be able to manage something more sophisticated than "hi." "You look beautiful," Ryan said, and there was something in his voice that made her wonder if he meant it or if he was just practicing for their audience. "Thank you. You look pretty fantastic yourself." Emma grabbed her purse and jacket, trying to ignore the way Ryan's aftershave was making her feel slightly lightheaded. Ready to convince a room full of strangers that were madly in love? "About that," Ryan said as they walked toward the elevator. "I've been thinking about our strategy for tonight." "Our strategy?" "The key to successful deception is maintaining consistent messaging while appearing natural and unrehearsed." Emma stopped walking and stared at him. "Ryan, please tell me you didn't create a presentation about tonight." "Not a presentation, more of a tactical framework." "Oh my goodness, you did. You created a business plan for our fake marriage dinner party." "I prefer to think of it as risk management." The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside with the awkward energy of two people who'd spent the week learning intimate details about each other while trying to pretend it was purely professional. "Okay," Emma said as they descended toward the lobby. "Hit me with the tactical framework." Ryan pulled out a small note card from his jacket pocket. Phase 1, Arrival and Initial Assessment. "We establish physical proximity, demonstrate casual intimacy through appropriate touching, and gauge the room's receptiveness to our relationship narrative." Appropriate touching. Hand-holding, brief shoulder contact, the occasional arm around the waist. Nothing that would seem forced or excessive. Emma felt her cheeks warming. They'd practiced some of this during their study sessions, but it had been clinical, almost scientific. The idea of Ryan touching her in front of other people, even fake touching, was doing strange things to her nervous system. "Phase 2, she managed. "Controlled information distribution. We volunteer just enough personal details to seem genuine while avoiding topics that could expose inconsistencies in our backstory." "And Phase 3, Ryan hesitated. "Crisis management. If we encounter unexpected questions or situations that threaten our cover story, we deflect with humor or redirect the conversation to safer topics." The elevator reached the lobby, and they walked toward Ryan's car, a sleek black BMW that was exactly the kind of vehicle she'd expected him to drive. "Ryan," Emma said as he opened her door. "Yes?" "What if we mess this up completely?" Ryan paused with his hand on the car door, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "We won't." "How can you be so sure?" "Because," Ryan said quietly, "we're better together than we are apart, even when we're pretending." The drive to Patricia Blackwood's house passed in a blur of last-minute cramming and mutual reassurance. Patricia lived in one of those sprawling mansions in the hills that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought subtlety was a character flaw. Emma counted at least 12 windows across the front facade, and what appeared to be a fountain in the driveway. "Remind me again why we couldn't just confess our sins and accept professional humiliation?" Emma asked as Ryan parked behind a Mercedes that probably cost more than her annual salary. "Because professional humiliation would involve explaining to HR why we lied about being married, which could result in disciplinary action, which could affect our career trajectories for the next decade." "Right, career trajectories. Much more important than my mental health." Ryan turned off the engine and turned to face her. "Emma, look at me." She met his eyes, struck again by how different he looked outside the office. Less intimidating, more accessible. "We're going to be fine," he said. "We know each other's stories, we've practiced our timing, and if anyone asks anything we can't answer, we'll handle it together." "Together," Emma repeated. "Together." There was something about the way he said it that made her chest feel warm and tight. Like maybe "together" meant more than just tactical partnership, which was ridiculous, of course. They approached the front door and Ryan reached for Emma's hand. The contact was electric, his palm warm and slightly rough, his fingers intertwining with hers like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Emma had to remind herself that this was performance, not reality. Patricia opened the door before they could knock, wearing a smile bright enough to power the Las Vegas Strip, and a dress that probably cost more than Emma's car. "Emma, Ryan, welcome to our home." Patricia air-kissed them both with the enthusiasm of someone greeting long-lost relatives. Come in. Everyone's so excited to meet the mysterious couple." They were ushered into a living room that looked like it had been photographed for Architectural Digest. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, and enough fresh flowers to stock a funeral home. 4 other couples were already gathered around an enormous sectional sofa, holding cocktails and wearing the kind of casual, elegant attire that suggested they regularly attended charity galas and yacht parties. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Ryan and Emma Chambers," Patricia announced, and Emma felt Ryan's hand tighten almost imperceptibly around hers at the sound of their names linked together. The introductions were a blur of names, handshakes, and polite small talk. There were the Hendersons, Harold, a senior partner at some law firm, and his wife Margaret, who immediately complimented Emma's dress and asked where she'd gotten it. The Washingtons, David and Carol, who owned a chain of boutique hotels and seemed genuinely nice, and the Sterlings, Richard, who worked in private equity, and his wife Vivian, who had the sharp eyes of someone who made a hobby of detecting other people's secrets. "So," Margaret Henderson said once everyone had settled with fresh drinks, "Patricia tells us you two have been married for 2 years. How did you manage to keep it so quiet?" Emma felt her prepared answer dissolve on her tongue like cotton candy in rain. This was it, their first real test in front of a live audience. "Well," Ryan said smoothly, his arm settling around Emma's shoulders with practiced ease, "Emma and I both value our privacy. We felt it was important to establish our relationship without the pressures of office gossip and public scrutiny." "How refreshingly mature," Carol Washington said approvingly. "So many couples today seem to document every moment on social media." "We're more traditional that way," Emma added, trying to ignore how right it felt to be tucked against Ryan's side. "We prefer to keep our personal moments personal. But surely you have some stories to share." Vivian Sterling leaned forward with the intensity of a prosecuting attorney. "How did you know Ryan was the one, Emma?" Emma's mind went completely blank. This wasn't in their script. They'd practiced meeting stories and proposal details, but no one had asked about the moment of realization, the emotional turning point that supposedly transformed a professional relationship into true love. Emma started, then stopped, acutely aware that 7 pairs of eyes were focused on her with laser-like attention. Ryan's hand began tracing small circles on her shoulder, a gesture so intimate and comforting that she almost forgot it was fake. "You know what?" Emma said, looking up at Ryan and finding something in his green eyes that gave her courage. It wasn't one specific moment. It was more like realizing that all the qualities that made Ryan challenging to work with were actually the same qualities that made him remarkable to love. "Such as?" Vivian pressed, clearly not satisfied with generalities. Emma felt Ryan's tension through his arm around her shoulders, but she was committed now. His attention to detail, which drove me crazy in meetings, meant he remembered every little thing I told him about my life. His insistence on thorough preparation, which frustrated me professionally, meant he never forgot important dates or events. His analytical nature, which seemed cold at first, was actually just his way of making sure everything was perfect. especially for the people he cared about. The room had gone quiet, and Emma realized with a start that she wasn't really acting anymore. Everything she'd said was true. She had come to see Ryan's professional intensity as evidence of deeper caring, had learned to read his subtle expressions and understand the thoughtfulness behind his seemingly rigid approach to everything. "That's beautiful," Margaret Henderson said softly. "And what about you, Ryan? When did you know?" Ryan was looking at Emma with an expression that made her heart skip several beats. "Emma has this way of seeing possibilities where everyone else sees problems," he said quietly. "She approaches every challenge with this combination of creativity and optimism that makes you believe anything is achievable. The first time she presented an idea to me, a campaign concept that was completely unconventional and absolutely brilliant, I knew I was looking at someone extraordinary." "Was that before or after you started dating?" David Washington asked with a grin. "Before," Ryan said, his eyes still locked on Emma's. "Long before I was smart enough to realize what I was feeling." Emma felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with performance anxiety and everything to do with the way Ryan was looking at her, like she really was extraordinary, like every word he'd just said was completely true. "Well, this is all very romantic," Patricia said, clapping her hands together. "But now comes the fun part. I thought we'd play a little game to see how well you all really know your spouses." She produced a basket filled with folded pieces of paper. "Each couple will take turns drawing questions, and both partners have to write down their answers separately. Then we'll see if your answers match." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. This was worse than a pop quiz. This was a marriage polygraph test administered by people who had decades of real relationship experience. "Who wants to go first?" Patricia asked brightly. "We will." Vivian Sterling volunteered immediately, her eyes glittering with the kind of competitive enthusiasm that suggested she'd been preparing for this moment all her life. The first few rounds went smoothly. The Sterlings knew each other's favorite movies and childhood pets. The Hendersons correctly matched on dream vacation destinations and most embarrassing moments. The Washingtons nailed questions about anniversary dates and first impressions. Then Patricia drew a card and smiled with barely contained glee. "This one's for Ryan and Emma. What was your partner's biggest fear when you first met?" Emma's pen hovered over her paper as her mind raced. They'd covered fears during their study sessions, but the question was asking about past fears, not current ones. What would Ryan have been afraid of 2 years ago when they supposedly first met? She glanced at Ryan, who was staring at his paper with the expression of someone trying to solve a calculus problem in his head. No subtle communication, no shared glances that might give them away. They were on their own. Emma took a deep breath and wrote down the first thing that came to mind: that he wasn't good enough. When they revealed their answers, Ryan had written, "being vulnerable with someone new." The silence in the room was deafening. "Oh," Patricia said, her smile faltering slightly. "Those are different answers." Emma felt her carefully constructed world beginning to collapse. This was it. The moment their elaborate deception crumbled in front of 8 people, who would undoubtedly share the story of their spectacular failure with everyone they knew. "Actually," Ryan said quietly, "they're the same answer." Everyone turned to look at him, including Emma. "Emma's right," Ryan continued, his voice steady despite the obvious tension. "My biggest fear when we met was that I wasn't good enough. For her, for the relationship, for the kind of vulnerability that real love requires. I was afraid of opening myself up to someone who might see through all my professional competence and realize I was just ordinary." Emma stared at him, recognizing the echo of their conversation from Monday night, when he'd admitted his fear of mediocrity. But this felt different, deeper, more personal. "And Ryan's answer is also correct," Emma said slowly, understanding dawning. "I was terrified of being vulnerable with someone new, especially someone I worked with. I'd been hurt before, and the idea of letting someone see the real me, the messy, imperfect, sometimes insecure me, was absolutely terrifying." So you both understood each other's fears without needing to discuss them explicitly, Carol Washington said, looking impressed. That's remarkable emotional intuition. It is, isn't it? Patricia said, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. The game continued, but Emma barely registered the other questions. She was too busy processing what had just happened. Ryan had saved them with his quick thinking and emotional honesty. But more than that, he'd revealed something real about himself, something that had nothing to do with their fake marriage and everything to do with who he actually was. When the evening finally ended, Emma and Ryan said their goodbyes with the polite enthusiasm of people who'd successfully survived a diplomatic summit. They made it to the car before either of them spoke. That, Ryan said, starting the engine with hands that weren't quite steady, was the most stressful 3 hours of my life. But we did it, Emma said, surprised by how exhausted she felt. We actually pulled it off. Did we? Vivian Sterling looked like she wanted to cross-examine us under oath. But she didn't, and everyone else seemed convinced. They drove in comfortable silence for several minutes before Ryan spoke again. Emma? Yes? What I said back there about knowing you were extraordinary from the first presentation you gave me. Emma's heart began beating faster. Yes? That wasn't part of our script. I know. It was true. Emma turned to look at his profile in the dim light from the dashboard. The things I said about understanding why your attention to detail and thoroughness were actually signs of caring, that was true too. This is complicated, Ryan said quietly. Very complicated. We should probably pretend this conversation never happened. Probably. But as Ryan pulled into her apartment building's parking garage, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them tonight. They'd started the evening as colleagues pretending to be married, but somewhere between the first cocktail and the last goodbye, the line between performance and reality had become dangerously blurred. Thank you, Emma said, as Ryan walked her to her door, for saving us back there with the fear question. That was brilliant improvisation. Thank you for making it believable, Ryan replied. Your explanation about vulnerability made perfect sense. They stood outside her apartment door, neither quite ready to end the evening, both aware that Monday would bring them back to the office where they'd have to navigate their real relationship in the context of their fake one. So, Emma said, I guess we're officially a successfully married couple now. Officially fictional, you mean? Right. Fictional. Ryan stepped closer, and Emma's breath caught. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Really kiss her, not for show or practice or tactical preparation, but because he wanted to. Instead, he reached past her and pressed the elevator button she'd forgotten to push. Good night, Emma, he said softly. Good night, Ryan. As the elevator doors closed between them, Emma leaned against the wall and tried to process what had just happened. They'd successfully convinced 8 people that they were happily married. They'd survived their first major test as a fake couple. So why did she feel like she was falling for someone who was supposed to be completely fictional? And why did she suspect that Ryan might be falling too? Emma woke up Sunday morning with the emotional hangover of someone who'd spent the previous evening successfully lying to 8 people while accidentally telling the truth about her feelings. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the dinner party, and trying to figure out when exactly her fake marriage to Ryan Chambers had started feeling less like performance art and more like wishful thinking. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and her heart did a ridiculous little leap when she saw Ryan's name on the screen. Thank you for last night. We made a good team. Hope you're recovering from our performance. Emma stared at the message for several minutes, analyzing every word like it was a crucial piece of evidence in a complex legal case. Performance. He was still calling it performance, which meant he was still thinking of their relationship as purely professional, which meant she was definitely overthinking everything. She typed back, We did make a good team. Thanks for the brilliant save with the fear question. See you Monday at the office, husband. She almost deleted the word husband, then decided it was appropriately joking given their situation, Except when she sent it, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like something else entirely. Her phone buzzed again almost immediately. "See you Monday, wife." Emma dropped her phone like it had suddenly caught fire. This was problematic. This was very, very problematic. She spent the rest of Sunday trying to convince herself that the flutter in her stomach when Ryan called her wife was just residual adrenaline from their successful deception. She organized her closet, did 3 loads of laundry, attempted to make pancakes from scratch, which resulted in what could charitably be described as edible frisbees, and binged an entire season of a reality dating show where people fell in love under completely artificial circumstances, which was absolutely not relevant to her current situation. By Sunday evening, she'd almost succeeded in convincing herself that everything she'd felt at the dinner party was just the natural result of intensive fake marriage preparation and shared stress. She and Ryan were colleagues who had successfully executed a complex social deception. Nothing more, nothing less. Then Monday morning arrived, and her carefully constructed rationalization crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. Emma walked into the office building at exactly 8:30 a.m., the same time she'd arrived every day for the past 3 years. She rode the elevator to the 14th floor, said good morning to Jessica, and settled at her desk with her usual Monday morning coffee and sense of impending deadline doom. Everything was completely normal, except that when Ryan stepped off the elevator at 8:45 a.m., looking impeccably professional in his navy suit and carrying his leather briefcase, Emma's heart performed an elaborate tap dance routine that had absolutely nothing to do with caffeine. Their eyes met across the office space, and for a moment, Emma saw something flicker in his expression, something warm and complicated that made her forget how to breathe properly. Then Ryan nodded politely, said, "Good morning, Emma," in his standard professional tone, and walked to his office as if nothing had changed, which technically nothing had. They were still colleagues, still fake married for the benefit of people who didn't work with them, still maintaining the same professional boundaries they'd always maintained. So why did Emma feel like something fundamental had shifted in the universe? "Emma!" Jessica appeared at her desk with the enthusiasm of someone bearing fresh gossip. "How was your weekend? Anything exciting happen?" Emma nearly choked on her coffee. "Why would you ask that?" "I don't know, you just seem different today, glowing maybe. Did you have a good time with Ryan?" "With Ryan?" Emma's voice came out slightly higher than intended. "Why would I spend time with Ryan?" Jessica raised her eyebrows. Because you're married to him?" "Right." Emma had completely forgotten that as far as her assistant knew, she and Ryan were blissfully wed and presumably spending their weekends doing married couple things like arguing about home improvement projects and sharing bathroom counter space. "Oh, right. Yes, we had a nice weekend. Very married-like. Married-like. You know, domestic, coupley. We did married people activities." Jessica was looking at her like she'd started speaking in ancient Greek. "Such as?" Emma's mind went blank. What did married couples do on weekends? She'd been single for so long that her weekend activities consisted primarily of takeout food, streaming services, and conversations with her houseplants. "We went to dinner," she said finally. "That sounds nice. Where did you go?" Emma realized with growing horror that she was about to describe the dinner party, where they'd spent 3 hours lying to strangers about their relationship. It was more of a group dinner with other couples." "Oh, fun, like a double date. More like an octuple date." Jessica laughed. "That sounds very social for Ryan. He's usually so private." Before Emma could dig herself deeper into this conversational hole, her phone rang. She grabbed it with the relief of someone grasping a life preserver. "Emma Brooks speaking." "Emma, this is Patricia Blackwood." The voice on the other end was as bright and commanding as ever. "I hope you don't mind me calling you at work, dear." Emma's stomach plummeted to somewhere around her ankles. "Of course not, Patricia. What can I do for you?" "Well, Harrison and I were just discussing what a lovely evening we had on Saturday, and we realized we never got the full story of how you and Ryan met. You mentioned a marketing conference in Chicago, but we'd love to hear more details. Emma's vision started going spotty around the edges. More details. About a fictional meeting at a fictional conference that they'd invented during one of their study sessions but hadn't fully developed because they'd been too focused on basic biographical information. Oh, Emma said weakly. It's not that interesting a story. Nonsense, every love story is interesting. Was it love at first sight? Did you hate each other initially? We're dying to know. Emma looked across the office toward Ryan's corner office, where she could see him through the glass walls, focused intently on his computer screen. She needed backup, and she needed it immediately. You know what, Patricia? I'd love to tell you the whole story, but I think Ryan tells it much better than I do. Could I have him call you back? He's just finishing up a client meeting. Oh, wonderful. I'll be in all morning. Have him call as soon as he's free. Emma hung up the phone and immediately dialed Ryan's extension. Ryan Chambers speaking. Conference room B right now, Emma said without preamble. Emergency. Emma, what kind of emergency? The kind where Patricia Blackwood wants to know exactly how we met, including details we haven't invented yet. There was a pause. I'll be right there. Emma hurried to conference room B, her heart beating like she'd just sprinted up 14 flights of stairs. Ryan arrived 30 seconds later, closing the door behind him with the grim expression of someone preparing for a crisis management meeting. What exactly did she ask? He said without preamble. Details about how we met at the marketing conference in Chicago. She wants to know if it was love at first sight or if we hated each other initially. And she wants you to call her back as soon as possible to tell her the whole story. Ryan sat down heavily in one of the conference room chairs. We should have prepared for this. We prepared for everything. We have favorite movies, childhood pets, anniversary dates, family histories. How were we supposed to know she'd want a minute-by-minute breakdown of our fictional first meeting? Because that's what people do, Emma. They want to hear romantic stories. They want details and emotions and narrative arc. Emma began pacing the small conference room like a caged animal. Okay, so we make something up. Right now, we create a meet-cute story that's believable and romantic and consistent with everything we've already told them. In the next 5 minutes. Do we have a choice? Ryan pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. Fine. Chicago Marketing Conference. We need a specific hotel, a specific situation, and a specific reason why we would have interacted despite working for the same company but not knowing each other well. Emma stopped pacing. Wait, we work for the same company. Why wouldn't we have known each other before a conference in Chicago? Because... Ryan paused, thinking. Because you were in the New York office and I was in the Los Angeles office. I transferred to New York 6 months after we got married. But everyone here knows you've been in the New York office for 3 years. Then we both started at the company recently, after we got married. Emma shook her head. Patricia knows our employment history. She's friends with HR people. They stared at each other across the conference table, the weight of their increasingly complex deception settling over them like fog. This is getting out of control, Emma said quietly. Completely out of control, Ryan agreed. We should just confess. Tell everyone the truth and deal with the consequences. You're right, we should. Neither of them moved. Emma, Ryan said after a long moment, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you having as much trouble as I am remembering that this isn't real? The question hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Emma felt her heart stop, restart, then begin beating in a rhythm that had nothing to do with panic and everything to do with hope. What do you mean? She asked carefully. Ryan leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair in the gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell for stress or uncertainty. I mean that when Patricia asked about love at first sight, my first instinct wasn't to invent a story. It was to tell her about the first time I saw you present an idea in a staff meeting and how you had this way of lighting up when you talked about your work and how I thought you were the most passionate, brilliant person I'd ever seen. Emma's breathing became very shallow. Ryan, And when she asked about hating each other initially, I wanted to tell her about how frustrated I was that someone so talented was so resistant to feedback, and how I stayed awake at night trying to figure out how to help you succeed without crushing your creative spirit. Those aren't fictional stories, Emma said quietly. No, they're not. Emma sat down across from him, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the table. When you saved us at the dinner party with the fear question, and you talked about being afraid you weren't good enough for me, was that fiction? Ryan met her eyes directly. What do you think? I think, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper, that we're in serious trouble. The kind of trouble that ends careers. The kind of trouble that changes everything. They sat in silence for several moments, the magnitude of their situation settling over them. They'd started with a simple lie to avoid social embarrassment, and somehow they'd ended up with something that felt more real than any relationship either of them had ever experienced. Emma's phone rang, making them both jump. She looked at the caller ID and felt her stomach drop. It's Patricia again. Don't answer it, Ryan said quickly. I have to answer it. If I don't, she'll call HR or show up here in person. Emma answered the phone with hands that weren't quite steady. Hello, Patricia. Emma, darling, I'm so sorry to bother you again, but I just had the most wonderful idea. Harrison and I would love to throw you and Ryan an anniversary party. I know your 2-year anniversary isn't until next month, but we thought it would be lovely to celebrate with all your colleagues. A surprise party at the office. Emma's vision tunneled. A surprise party. At the office. Where everyone would expect them to act like a loving married couple in front of their actual colleagues, who knew their real relationship history. That's so thoughtful of you, Patricia, but really, you don't need to. Nonsense. It's already in motion. I've spoken with your HR department about coordinating it. They're so excited. Apparently, everyone had wondered about Ryan's mysterious personal life, and now they can't wait to celebrate your love story. Emma looked at Ryan, who had gone pale enough to require medical attention. When were you thinking? Emma managed to ask. This Friday afternoon, right after the quarterly staff meeting. It'll be perfect. Everyone will already be gathered in the main conference room. Emma closed her eyes. Friday, 4 days away. In front of every single person they worked with, including people who had known them both for years, and would definitely notice if their relationship dynamic suddenly shifted from professional colleagues to devoted spouses. Patricia, that sounds absolutely wonderful. Emma lied with the desperation of someone agreeing to their own execution. We'll be surprised. Oh, you will be. I've already ordered a cake and champagne. And I thought it would be sweet to have you both share the story of how you met with everyone. You know, since it's such a romantic tale. Emma's hand started shaking so violently, she had to grip the phone with both hands. Share our story, at the office, in front of everyone. Yes, it'll be like a mini wedding reception. Everyone will love it. After Emma hung up, she and Ryan sat in complete silence for several minutes. So, Ryan said finally, we have 4 days to either become the world's most convincing fake married couple, or figure out how to explain to our entire office why we've been lying about being married. There's a third option, Emma said quietly. Which is, we stop pretending. Ryan looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. What do you mean? Emma took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to jump off a very tall cliff with no idea if there was water at the bottom. I mean, we stop pretending that this is all fake. We stop pretending that we don't care about each other. We stop pretending that what happened at the dinner party was just good acting. Emma, I'm falling for you, Ryan. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I'm falling for you, and I don't think it has anything to do with our fake marriage. I think it has to do with getting to know who you really are when you're not being the intimidating director who shoots down my proposals. Ryan stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Do you know what you're saying? I'm saying that maybe we don't have to lie to everyone on Friday. Maybe we just don't tell them it started as a lie. Emma, that's incredibly risky. More risky than continuing to lie to everyone we work with? More risky than admitting we've been lying to everyone we work with. Emma leaned forward, her heart beating so hard she was sure Ryan could hear it. What if it's not lying anymore? What if we make it real? You want to turn our fake marriage into a real relationship 4 days before we have to convince our colleagues that we've been secretly married for 2 years. I want to stop being afraid of what I feel for you. Ryan was quiet for so long that Emma began to wonder if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her professional and personal life. She was about to backtrack, to laugh it off as stress-induced temporary insanity, when Ryan spoke. Emma, I need you to understand something. Okay. I've been falling for you since our first study session. Maybe before that. Maybe since the first time you argued with me about campaign strategy and made me realize that passion and intelligence are an irresistible combination. Emma felt her heart stop, then restart with enough force to power a small city. Really? Really? But Emma, if we do this, if we make this real, there's no going back. We can't pretend it was all fake if it doesn't work out. We can't return to being just colleagues who occasionally disagree about font choices. I know. And if we tell everyone at the anniversary party that we've been secretly married for 2 years, we have to be prepared to actually build a relationship that lives up to that story. I know. It's complicated, Emma. We work together. We'll have to navigate office politics and professional boundaries and the fact that I'm technically your supervisor. I know. Ryan stood up and walked to the conference room window, looking out at the city below. There's something else you should know. Emma's stomach clenched. What? I've been thinking about asking for a transfer to the West Coast office. What? Why? Ryan turned back to face her. Because I was falling for you, and I thought the only professional thing to do was remove myself from the situation before it became problematic. Emma felt like she'd been punched in the chest. You were going to leave? I was going to leave because I thought what I was feeling was one-sided and inappropriate. And now? Now I'm wondering if maybe the most inappropriate thing would be walking away from something that could be extraordinary. Emma stood up, her legs slightly unsteady. So what do? We have 4 days to figure out if what we feel for each other is real enough to build a life on, or if we're just caught up in the excitement of our elaborate deception. How do we figure that out? Ryan walked toward her, stopping just close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. We spend the next 4 days not pretending. We go on real dates, have real conversations, and see if Ryan and Emma work as well as Mr. and Mrs. Chambers. And then, on Friday afternoon, when Patricia asks us to tell everyone how we met, we either tell the truth about falling in love, or we tell the truth about falling apart. Emma looked up at him, this man who had somehow become the most important person in her life in the span of 2 weeks, and made the scariest decision of her career. Okay. Let's find out if we're as good at being real as we are at being fake. Ryan smiled. Not his polite professional smile, but the real one that made her forget how to think clearly. In that case, Emma Brooks, would you like to have dinner with me tonight? A real dinner, not a strategic planning session disguised as a meal. Are you asking me on a date, Ryan Chambers? I'm asking the woman I think I'm falling in love with if she'd like to spend an evening finding out if I'm right. Emma felt her entire world tilt on its axis. Yes, I'd like to have dinner with you. Yes, I'd like to find out if what we feel is real, and yes, I think I'm falling in love with you too. Ryan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender and intimate that Emma felt tears prick her eyes. So, he said softly, I guess we're not pretending anymore. I guess we're not. Emma, yes? I'm terrified. Me too. Good. If we weren't terrified, it wouldn't be real. As they left the conference room together, Emma caught Jessica watching them with undisguised curiosity. For the first time since this whole charade began, Emma didn't feel the need to analyze her expression or worry about maintaining their cover story. Because for the first time, she wasn't pretending, and that, she realized, made all the difference. Friday was still 4 days away. 4 days to figure out if their fake marriage could become a real relationship. 4 days to discover if Emma Brooks and Ryan Chambers were as compatible as Mr. and Mrs. Chambers had been. 4 days to fall in love for real. Emma had never been so excited to be terrified in her entire life. The end.